The Hilltop Glove Podcast is sponsored by Mid-Carolina Service Company.
Mid-Carolina Service Company is the first name to search for your residential or commercial HVAC needs in Lexington and surrounding areas.
Just go holler at Jason and Clint. They'll hook you up on the air conditioners, on the restaurant equipment, refrigerators, refrigeration, ice machine repair. They've been doing this for years. I know them cats forever.
Family owned and operated since 2006, they pride themselves in their quality work and customer relationships. Call 803-356-4153 or visit midcarolinaserviceco.com for a no obligation quote for service today.
The Hilltop Glove Podcast is sponsored by True Brilliance Entertainment.
True Brilliance is a production, promotions, and management company dedicated to connecting artists and producers across the Carolinas to music industry professionals.
Several of their clients have placements both domestic and internationally as a result of their services.
Are you an artist or producer looking to build meaningful relationships within the music industry? Then True Brilliance is for you. Check them out at paramilitary.com. That's spelled P-A-I-R-A military.com.
This episode of the Hilltop Glove Podcast is sponsored by Bob's. Bob's is a Columbia-based retailer of over 100 Black-owned products from 20 Black-owned businesses. Bob's offers a wide range of items from household cleaning, cosmetics, and everything in between. With every visit to Bob's, you support Black-owned businesses, giving them the opportunity to grow and establish connections with our community. Bob's is located inside the Noma warehouse at 2222 Sumter Street in Columbia, South Carolina. Visit their website, weshopbobs.com for in-store pickup or to find out more. Bob's can also be found via social media on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at weshopbobs. When you stop by, tell them the Hilltop Glove sent you. Bob's brings quality Black brands to the Columbia community. The Hilltop Glove Podcast is sponsored by Red Rooster Sports Bar and Grill. Red Rooster is your neighborhood bar and grill serving the best wings, burgers, and baskets in the Met.
Like the amazing food, the bar is always on tap, and there's plenty of screens to watch the big game. Red Rooster is the Midland's premier meetup spot for local car and bike clubs, fraternities, and sororities.
Staff is dedicated to accommodating all kinds of parties and events. If you're looking to catch a game, have a bite, and a drink, look no further than the Red Rooster.
Red Rooster is located at 7500 Wilson Boulevard, Columbia, South Carolina. For more information, visit redroostersportsbar.com or visit them on Facebook and Instagram at Red Rooster Sports Bar. Go where the winners go.
Welcome to the Hilltop Glove Podcast.
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 This episode of the Hilltop Glove Podcast is sponsored by Turntable City, located at 202 Suite A, West Main Street in Lexington, South Carolina, where you can find vinyl, records, albums, and everything in between. For more information about selling vinyl, CDs, and tapes, please visit their website, www.turntable-city.com, where you can download the sound of turntable with free DJ mixes, remixes, and instrumentals. Be sure to follow them on Facebook and Instagram at Turntable City.
Welcome to the Hilltop Glove Podcast, where Skip and DJ Ann Watt interview guests and discuss topics such as business, current events, and pop culture. The motivational podcast for the hip-hop millennial.
Good morning, everybody. This is Skip, and of course, I'm here, my brother from another mother, Mike. And today we're going to be talking. So, And today we're going to be talking with Ja Freedom. Ja is a Charlotte-based music producer, DJ, host, tastemaker, and creator of the Frequency 360 Collective. One thing I realized, Ja, when we started putting together this interview and started like doing research for it, like I've always known like you're a serious instrumentalist, but I didn't realize how serious of an instrumentalist you were. And so when I was going through your Bandcamp, and I was reading the bio, it was very interesting. It said, I make music, I meditate, I love, I hate bad things. And I think, right. And I was like, man, this is great. Yeah, excellent communicator. Excellent. Like he just explained everything right there. And I was like, you know what? That is exactly him. Like he didn't take a paragraph to explain who he is.
Try to keep it simple.
I see that. And I know one of the things that I thought was really cool was just the amount of different projects that you've created over the years. Of course, I follow you on IG and on Facebook, and I see just like things you put out like on a daily basis. But I didn't even realize like you have like full collections of instrumental projects and works just independently, just outside of just that normal like posting on IG and Facebook. And I know things like that take a lot of time and effort, and it shows dedication to your art. So if you could just tell us about your journey into music, and even just talking a little bit about Frequency 360.
Sure. Well, music is kind of something that I grew up in. It's my family has always been musically inclined. So like I have older family members who did gospel groups. My father was a minister. And so we grew up playing instruments in the church. So one of the memories my mom always would talk about is that me being like 2 or 3 years old, crawling into the kitchen and pulling out the pots and pans and banging on them, when I'm like 2 and 3 years old. So drums are my first instrument. My younger brother plays the piano. My other brother, he does art and music. So just art, creativity has always been in my family. I have cousins who were like the old school traveling black gospel groups. So they did that. So music has always been a part of my life. Like my dad would tell me stories. And like I said, I'm a PK, I'm a preacher's kid. So my dad wasn't always saved. And that's one of the things he would always talk about his early life. And he would tell these stories about James Brown and Jackie Wilson and all these cats. And, I didn't believe him at first until I read one of James Brown's autobiographies. And he described something that my dad had told me as a kid in detail in the book. And I went to him and I'm like, hey, you know what? I apologize. I didn't know how, that, sometimes, your parents be exaggerating stuff. And that was not the case. So, and he always encouraged music and creativity for us. So like if I wanted to, take guitar lessons, he would pay for guitar lessons when he was going back to school, and they would have these concert series, and he knew I loved music. So I'm the only black kid at these orchestral presentations because he knew I just love music, any kind. That's who would take me. It'd be the 2 little chocolate drops and all these, looking at these concertos, and I'm sitting there just mesmerized by the different types of music. So it wouldn't just be black music. It would be just any type of music. So he would take me to indigenous music for like India I was also raised by a Thai and Chinese lady, but it was my second mom. Okay. So I grew up listening to that type of music. So Thai and loud music. So music was always an integral part of my life. It's because of my family. And, I come from the old school block parties and where people were playing Zapp and Funkadelic and Rick James, on big house speakers outside, where I think that's a lost art too, where this music was an everyday piece of what you did every day. So that's kind of like my journey in music. It's always been kind of there for me, and it gave me an outlet for creativity or feelings that I didn't understand at that time. So while I'm not the greatest at every instrument, I like to touch them all and see what they sound like and, bang out on them. Or, I just hear things in my head. Like I can hear if I'm just out and about and I hear a pattern in rain and I'm like, hey, do you hear that? Do you hear that? And like, what are you talking about? I'm the only person hearing it. It's just, once you get in tune with certain things that you can it's a frequency, and it kind of takes us to a frequency. So I've done music for like a really long time, music, art, not just music itself, but I'm a firm believer in art is the pressing forward button of any society or culture. You can gauge a society and a culture by its art. So a lot of times we have separation in art, whether it's food or painting or music, and we tend to separate them all, but it's all art. Photography, filmmaking, it's all art. And I've been doing music and collaborations with artists for such a long time. And I moved to Charlotte, and I just really noticed that there was a disparate amount. There's all these disparate groups, because I used to travel a lot. That's what brought me to Columbia, because, when I just came down to the South from where I'm originally from, I would just go to shows all over the place, or beat battles all over the place, just to meet people and to just get different vibes. And what I noticed in Charlotte is that you had all these different groups that they could be together, but they just don't. So I said, well, let me start putting all these different types of people in a room together and see what happens. And it just really turned out to be really, really awesome, and built a lot of partnerships. It built a lot of relationships and some copycats. But that's, that's par for the course. But it's always been something for me to be. It's one of my superpowers is I'm a networker, and I'm good at putting people together. And I just kind of use my power for good. I sat in a room pacing in front of my girl's house one day, and said, I want to put something together that's really dope that no one's ever done before. And she sat and watched me pace in a room for 2 days until I came up with the idea and concept for Frequency 360. So she's awesome. She's actually sitting right behind me, making sure I don't say anything crazy.
It's nothing wrong with that.
And so what motivates me today to create is that it's intrinsic within my spirit. If I wasn't creating something, I would hate myself. So I have to be constantly making something, whether I'm sitting sketching or doodling some melodies or singing or trying to put some people together or tasting some new food, always creating, because I cook too. That's another thing about creation.
And you know what? That is right. You do cook.
Yep.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I was seeing you post, some pictures of like some different meals and stuff like that. You don't just stick with one thing. It's not like you're like, because some people are just like, they're purely like meat people and carnivores, and everything they do is it doesn't have bacon or it doesn't have a piece of steak on it. They don't cook it. And at the same time, you aren't necessarily like a vegan either. So no. Like I say, you eat like a regular person. At least that's how I like to say it.
Hey, I tell you, I cook me most of y'all mamas. So don't try me.
It's one of the things about creative people is like a lot of times we're involved in so many different things because we're trying to kind of express these things through whatever medium it takes to do it. One of the things I want to talk to you about, though, is the idea of being a creative entrepreneur. And, particularly for me, it's always been hard when you're kind of like utilizing your talent and your art and then trying to generate income off of it, but also stay true to that. It's almost like if you're really tapping that void and you're really, getting that creative, it's almost like you're a conduit for it. Yeah. And then every time you turn around, just my personal experience, every time you turn around and try to make income off of it, then there ends up being nibbling away at that core thing, but it's definitely like a blessing to make money off of what you love doing. And so it's still always one of those things that we're trying to balance as to like, how much of this is our art and how much of this is income. And I know that you had, an experience with transitioning from corporate America into pursuing your passion. And I know that's like just terrifying. So I wanted to know if you could kind of share some of those experiences about your transition. I know you just talked a little bit about how Frequency 360 got started, but if you've got any kind of insights or advice you can give to other creatives who are struggling with this also, that'd be awesome.
Okay. Well, there's no one way of doing it. And we were having a conversation about this. I don't know how controversial I can be, but I'll be a little controversial, especially for Black creatives. We have an apprehension of starting businesses or being entrepreneurs because we're taught for so long that, you have to do X, Y, and Z, get a job, work for the man, work for 50 years and then retire and then buy a boat. Right. But the people who are unlike us, they don't necessarily have those brackets put on them. And like I have friends of mine that are Caucasian that they're taught to follow your passion, follow your dream, and you always have something to fall back on if you want to. And I think for us as Black or minority entrepreneurs, we let fear dominate most of our decision making. And you can't be afraid and you can't be scared. Now, is everything going to be perfect? No. Will you have lean days? Yes. Or will there be days where you say, man, I wish I hadn't have done this? Yes. But then there are also those days where you have seen someone smile or someone comes up to you and say, man, you changed my life. Or, you have that balling out month where it's like, whoa, I'm rich.
Everything just lines.
Yeah. So I think for most entrepreneurs is that you have to get out of your own way. You can't be afraid of a few different things. Okay. One, you can't be afraid to fail. Two, you can't be afraid of what people think about you, and you can't be afraid of what the circumstances are going to be and what happens next. Once you get past those three things, then, you start having a fearlessness about what you're doing, and you can go from there. Now, am I saying I'm the most successful person that I know? No, I know people way more successful than I am, but I'm one of those people that if I have an idea, I will make it happen. I will make it happen.
It's good. It's good. And I also think like if you are the most successful person then you probably need to meet some people. Right? Like your networking ain't right then.
Correct.
Exactly. And I think one of the things that you said that really caught me was that when you first start talking about it is a lot of times as a culture, we've been conditioned, especially by like those that came before us, not necessarily to play it safe, but it's like, well, this is what I know worked for my cousin, or this is what worked for my uncle or my aunt, right? These are the things that work. These things that you're trying to do, there's risk to it. I know a guy that tried to do this, or I know somebody that tried to do this and they aren't successful, or they're broke, or they don't have a retirement, or they don't, or they don't have any benefits.
Artists.
Right.
Exactly. And you see that a lot of that, especially within our community. It's like, okay, well, it's like, and one of the first things is, like you said, it's about a good job, and that was like a big thing. It's always about having a good job. So and even like, exactly.
Trust your employer to look out for you. Like that's going to happen.
Yeah. It doesn't happen anymore.
No, it isn't. So, yeah. So I think that's something that I think our generation is really starting to kind of address. It started to kind of, go out on their own, which, before our parents, because of the limited opportunities that were there, societally speaking, they had no choice but to be entrepreneurial. So you're kind of seeing a return to that. And so I think that's pretty dope.
Yeah. And I was lucky enough to see even though I didn't understand it at the time, but Black entrepreneurs growing up. So my godfather owned a floor shop and his brother owned a tailor shop. And so there were other Black male entrepreneurs that I actually got to see. And so when you see other people who don't have fear and say, well, I'm going to make this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to follow my passion. And like I said, doing flowers is a creative endeavor. So you would think a Black man owning a floor shop, you know what I mean? But it's creative and it's beautiful. And it's showing that you can take whatever your art is and monetize it. Now, I'm not telling everybody to go out there and quit your job tomorrow because your circumstances may not warrant that. But if you have an idea, no matter what it is, and you know what, not everyone needs to be a musician. And that's one of the things that about Frequency too, is that I wanted to make sure that when we're looking at music, we're not just looking at one particular aspect of music. If we're looking at being a chef, we're not looking at one particular aspect of being a chef. There's so many different ways that you can make money and that you can monetize those things that you don't have to be the person in the forefront. So, you know, musicians need managers. Musicians need people to manage their day to day. You know, producers need people to help them with their gear. You know, chefs need people to source their ingredients. So there's different avenues that everyone wants to look at the most glamorous piece of the puzzle. And that's not always the most lucrative piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times there's a lot of money being made that we don't see.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you're, you know, one of the things that I've tried to do in my life is if there's some area that I don't know what I'm doing in, then I try to get somebody to pay me to be in some kind of circumstance where I can either like do that with a little bit of a safety net to fail or just watch them do it properly so I can learn it. You know, like every job is kind of like you finding a way to fill in another piece of that puzzle.
Yep, 100%. And, you know, we can't be ashamed to be able to say that I don't know everything and that I can turn something over to somebody else. Now, one of the things that I do, I can say about myself, and it's just my background, because from my corporate background is that we did a lot of Six Sigma and Black Belt, just basically looking at causation and see what makes things happen. And it's, if you look at least trying to understand what an aspect of, I don't have to be the greatest at it. So for example, video work, right? I will never profess to be someone who's great at video, but I know enough and I've taught myself or been around enough folks to understand where I have a working knowledge of it. So that way, when I'm talking to someone who does video, we can have a conversation on the same level. So I can express what I need and they understand what I'm saying. And so that's one of the things that as creative entrepreneurs, you have to be you have to be able to give up some, but then also be able to learn some at the same time. So I need to learn enough to where I can communicate to someone else who may be better at what I need. So that way I can level up. So if you are a photographer, for example, you're going to be around other photographers who are better than you, but you have to understand that language. So that way you can get the information and disseminate it for yourself.
That's true. Mm-hmm. That's very true. And I think one of the things, especially when it comes to starting out as a creator, especially if you're trying to make money off of it, is you got to understand, you got to learn, like you got to get inspiration. You got to get instruction. You got to get, knowledge from somewhere. And one of the best ways to do that, of course, people do stuff, you have like YouTube, YouTube is like a university now. Pretty much. Yeah, you pretty much learn anything off of YouTube. But there's something about, like you said, making those direct connections with people in areas in which in areas or at least doing things you aspire to do.
Right.
or the skill wise. And I think that's always been beneficial. I know when I started out doing photography, one of the things that helped me out tremendously was when I started connecting with people and actual photographers, like people who've been shooting professionally, and not even people that shoot exactly what I wanted to shoot at the time. Just people who've mastered that craft, have experience in it. A couple months ago, we actually interviewed a guy by the name of Crush Rush. He's a photographer here in Columbia, and he was probably one of the first people to sit me down and to show me how to use this program called Lightroom on Adobe to edit pictures. I just knew I was just like, okay, this is what you're supposed to use to edit pictures. Right. And I was going on YouTube, I was checking this stuff out, but it wasn't really clicking to me. And I remember one day, and this is how the irony of it was, I was actually in a studio session, and he actually came through the studio session because he does percussion and stuff too. And so we were laying out a track for it, but he saw me in the corner working on some pictures. Right. And he looked at it. He's like, okay, well, he's like, I already see where you're messing up at. You need to do this, and this.
Change them curves, bro.
Yeah. And he changed the terms, and he broke it down to me, like he explained to me like the difference, like with white balance, highlights, all these things I didn't really take into consideration or I didn't know about. Like he actually gave me the official names and terms for them, and he told me the importance of why you adjust those things. Or if you've added too much black here, this is what it does to your shadows. And so things I just had no idea about. But I know I wanted my pictures to look good, but he explained to me the exact terms and the reason why I make those adjustments. And from there, man, like my editing as far as photography changed overnight. But it was because I was able to, like you said, link up with people who are already in that profession, that are already doing it, to where I can learn something.
And you were open to learning. I think what kind of separates kind of the folks from my generation and some of the newer creative entrepreneurs is that they don't necessarily, and not saying that everyone has to have the same path, but you have to build off the backs of the ones that came before you. Because if you don't know what it took to get to where that person is, then you're gonna make the same mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you're not going to understand fully what your process is. We have these folks, like I said, when I was in corporate, you would have these folks coming directly out of college with they would have book smarts, but they have no practical knowledge of, say, the programming or the processes. And they would try to make changes on things. They would come in and they would break things all the time because they didn't take the time to understand the process to get to where it was at the time. They're just thinking, oh, this doesn't work the way I wanted to. I'm going to change this, and this, not understanding the things that happen behind the scenes. So I think that, like you're saying with your example, you had to find out, okay, this black looks like this because of this. So now that I know the baseline information, I can get creative with it, but I know the basics. And a lot of people want to come in and try to dunk, and they can't shoot from the free throw line.
Right. I think a lot of that comes from just like the capitalist entrepreneurial kind of environment in America, like breeds a lot of fake it till you make it. And,
right.
Like that's the only way that people are going to give you money is if you give them 100% confidence that you know how to do all of this. But then in the creative realm, it's like so much more important to be humble and soak up everything, because part of this whole experience is that everybody's got a little piece of the puzzle. And if you're really trying to put it together, you got to know and understand what's going on from all those points of view.
Mm-hmm. Because you're not an island, and you can be the most talented person in the world, but everyone has a team. The people who are the most successful have a support system around them.
That's exactly it. And I think a lot of people don't even realize the importance of that. I know that's something I was talking about with a friend of mine earlier this week. Is just the importance of having, like you said, when it comes to creatives, importance of having a team and having people. You don't necessarily have to agree with each other all the time or be, but at least from the point of like collaborating with each other, working together and supporting each other to kind of build value and to push what your movement forward or whatever the group is doing as a collective forward. And it just and it's just the reason why I think, especially in our community, especially with Black creatives, I know that's something that I've seen over like the past couple years is a lot of times people can become, I don't want to say necessarily territorial.
Yes.
But
it's territorial.
Yeah, we'll just say it. Like, yes, it's like it's very territorial, and it surprised me initially when I first started like getting involved in that environment and in that community and really seeing it. Especially when it comes to things like events, it comes to like partnerships, it comes to especially working outside of the community too. I guess like mainstream community, just in whatever city or, I've seen it and I've seen how it's like people can be pitted against one another because it's like there can only be like one Black guy creative in this, in this town or in this zone. Right. He's either one or the other. And you got to take your, and it's like it's like people kind of get pitted against each other. But
they keep teaching us about scarcity and lack. And there's enough for everybody. There's more than enough for everybody. But we also have to take a look at different ways, because if 10 people are trying to do the same exact thing, you got 10 people doing the same exact thing. You have to look at different avenues, different income streams, different ways of getting your message out there that other people aren't doing. And that's why people are so territorial, is because they're afraid of branching out besides of what they feel is comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Let me get controversial real quick, Kev.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm going to just say that thing that you're talking about, that influence, like that is the influence of imperialism. That is colonialism. That is the idea that you have to dominate and suppress everything else around you to get to the top. And that's not the culture that we want to exist in. That's just where we are.
No, I agree, man. Like, cause it's something and I know it and I can speak on Colombia, right? Cause I live in Colombia and I consider myself a part of that community. And I've seen it and I've seen it so much in Colombia to where it's like, it's insane. And I don't think the people that are always involved really understand it. I guess because maybe with the way I grew up and how I see things, I've always looked at those cultural dynamics, like as far as like from not even from a racial perspective, but like you said, from that imperialistic type of mind, like, okay, you have these people, it's like people outside the culture, they're coming in to, okay, this is kind of cool. This is interesting. Let's kind of support this idea.
Right. But we're still there. Let's try it.
Yeah, exactly. And I've always noticed that. And it's like, and so when I used to go places and I would meet people, I could immediately, now and I'm just being honest, I go, okay, this is like the person that's like the money person. This is the person that brings the money to the table. So they got to keep this person kind of happy or stay in this person's good graces to keep the money coming. It's okay. I get it. That's how the world works. I'm going to go about my business. And so, and look, and like I said, and just like with that being said, I just always felt like we got to emphasize just like collaboration, especially among like Black creatives and creatives of color. And I think that's the dope thing with Frequency 360 is that you guys, that's your focus, is encouraging collaboration amongst creatives. That's what it is. Like everything about it. Like I remember, I think it was 2019 around Thanksgiving. You had the interview with Cedric Emoja.
Yep.
And I remember it was an amazing interview, but I remember everybody else that was in there as well. They were other creatives. but they were there not only to support you, but to support Cedric as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the dope thing, because a lot of times for people, they're like, if it's not specifically about me or what I want to do, I really don't have an interest in it.
Mm-hmm. Boy, I have sermons about that, right?
Yeah. And I thought that's what I said. I thought that was the beautiful thing about it. And that's why I said, like when I was telling you a couple of days ago, I was like, you have an amazing gift as a connector when it comes to linking people, linking and connecting with folks, especially. And I think the icing on top of the cake is you're able to do that outside of your city. Mm-hmm. As well. So it's not like you're somebody that when you go to this city, you talk to him. Like, no, people over here also know you. People over here also, you know what I mean? And that's like a gift to itself. And a lot of people don't really can really appreciate that sometimes. But with that said, how important do you feel is it for like Black creatives to just regularly collaborate with each other? And why is it needed today?
Okay. Well, it's important for Black creatives to collaborate with each other because, one, iron sharpens iron. I know that's super cliche, but it's very real. You get to learn from someone who may have a skill set that's completely different than you and open up something in your own brain that you never thought of before. It's not biting. I'll be around, piano players who are 10 times better than I am, but I'm learning, and, in exchange, I'll help them with drum program because I'm better at I'm really good at drums, or I'm really good at laying out melodies. Or if I'm out somewhere and I see an artist that's really dope and I was like, you know what? This person's looking for an album cover. Let me put you in contact with them. I think you guys would match. But then you build relationships and friendships and networking. And that's where it all comes from. And because one, as minority creatives, we have even though Black people are not monolith, we have very unique experiences for ourselves. So, Jill Johnson, who went to, an art institute and, became an artist, is going to be different than Jamal Jackson, who started doing graffiti on the wall and then became a big artist. As a Black creative, I'll have more in common with Jamal, whether I went to art school or not. It's because of our common understanding of the art and where we're coming from, as opposed to Jill, who came up through, a particular art school and learned how to do things the perfect way. I think that what you were talking about before about Black people being territorial or just minority creatives being territorial, it is hindered a lot of our growth because we are afraid of becoming bigger collectives and becoming stronger together, because we got 5 artists putting out quality work or 5 photographers putting out quality work. Say, hey, I can't do it this week. I want to pass it over to my man. And so somebody didn't have to search for it. It just makes more sense that you all know each other and you all get better because the tide rises all waves at the same time.
I think you just spelled out our philosophy with the podcast.
Yeah, because that's essentially what we do. So, of course, COVID is something that's been going on for a while now. That's been like a main theme of everything in the world recently. Of course, now things are starting to, I guess, come back to some, resemblance of normalcy. What do you feel like, because I know over the past year or so, one thing I've seen is a lot of people doing things like Clubhouse, Patreon, and people have been meeting collaboratively through these platforms. But what do you think in-person events and activities are going to look like post-COVID, especially for creatives?
Okay. For me, I know that for the Frequency 360 Live series that I did where I bring in the creatives, that's going to change. If I bring it back, it's going to change. One, location is going to change, but then I think the way that I'm going to do it is going to change too. One of the things that I made sure that I did when I had those events, and I'll kind of, for the people who don't know what the Frequency 360 Live events were, so I would bring in creatives from different types of creative outlets, from business owners to superstars to regular local people just getting started. So we've had Maceo from De La Soul, X from Red Nubian, Mike G from Jungle Brothers, Andy Castanis is one of the biggest business owners in Charlotte. We had some of the guys from Soul Food Sessions that are, if you know James Beard, chefs, just a little bit of everybody there, just in a room in a bodega on a Saturday afternoon, drinking, cracking jokes, and telling people about their life story. So that way you can learn, and people, A&Rs from different labels. So it was to teach people not only about how you got there, but how you felt when you got there, the ups and the downs, the good and the bad. You know, a lot of times that people look at the wins only, but I learned just as much from the quote unquote people who failed. And because I say quote unquote, because if there are people out there that have gotten deals, that have made movies, that aren't super famous, but they've done much more than people complaining or dissing them have done, which is crazy. Is, oh, he ain't done nothing. He's a failed musician. But what have you done? Nothing. You sitting there talking bad about somebody, and I like to sit and listen to those folks and find out what's going on. So one of the things about Frequency Live is that I did a couple of podcasts for it on audio, but I wanted to make sure that it was something that people went to go see, because I filmed them.
Yeah.
And I recorded them, but I'm like, you know what? I want it to be, there's a different experience that you get from seeing something live and in person. And because you can actually interact in a different way. Podcasts are great, right? I love podcasts. But for this particular thing, when that particular thing that I was doing, it needed to have been something that was an experience and not just archived data.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Like there is a energetic feedback that you get from being in the same place at the same time with people and talking about similar ideas. Definitely.
And it's a joined experience that you have with the 20, 30, 50, 100 people in the room that you'll have forever, you know, and it's something that's very unique. So I think that post COVID, here's a good and a bad thing, right? The good thing is that it's opened up people to creative entrepreneurship, right? More podcasts, et cetera. The bad thing about it is that not everyone is good. And not everyone is doing it for the right reasons. So you have a lot of these celebrities who, oh man, I'm bored in my house. I'm doing these podcasts now, and they're terrible.
Yeah, they're
terrible. They're just famous. But, you know, they're bad. And so it's kind of like you have to weed through the particular things to find the better stuff. You know, it's like there's a bunch of fast food now post-COVID. So I think that a lot of the wheat and the chaff is going to get separated over the next 6 months, you know, because a lot of these folks are not going to be able to consistently put out content the way that people consume content now. Like,
we run through it.
I'm not going to name any names, but there's one particular podcast that's made by this semi-famous person, right? But the thing is, it's never every week. And so I just forget about it. So he'll do like two or 3 weeks in a row, and then nothing. Might be 2 or 3 weeks. I'm like, oh, well, I just forget about it, you know?
Yeah.
What's going to happen, the wheat and the chaff are going to separate. So the people who really take their time and move forward, those are the ones who are going to last. I'll give you an example. So in podcasting, you know, one of the biggest and the originators of the big black podcast is from Charlotte.
Didn't know that.
The black guy who tips, he was one of the first ones. And I didn't know he was from Charlotte. He was on my list to get for Frequency. But that's someone who is a black creative who took a leap of faith, and it was in Charlotte.
Now that I didn't know.
The wheat and the chaff. He's been doing it for so long, but he was like the originator of the nerdy black big podcast.
That is dope.
That kind of brings us into another thing. You know, over the past few years, really probably over the past decade or so, we've really been following the development of creative hubs, creative entrepreneurial hubs. I know when I was coming up, there was a lot of video production work out of the area around Atlanta. And so the Carolinas were feeding off a lot of that. We're in Columbia. So Columbia is always trying to be Asheville or Greenville. Yeah, that's what it is. We want to have cool creative stuff, and it just takes years and years of people working on it to get there. I know one of the things that Kevin was sharing with me recently was about the Raleigh-Durham area and how that's really been a hotbed for Black creatives in particular. And I know that you are doing some work like this, trying to develop Charlotte. I think Charlotte is probably a little bit farther along than Columbia just because of size and volume. But I kind of wanted to know what it's been like for you trying to build these communities. It ties right back into your work with Frequency 360. And, if you think there's, more opportunity for the Carolinas to keep developing these kind of networks.
Yes. Well, it's been easy and difficult at the same time. I'll tell you something that, man, I'm spilling the beans on some folks. I'm trying to say this in a really nice way.
Say it however you need to say it.
This is for Black business owners. Black business owners, I need you guys to take a page, and how we were talking about earlier about fearlessness is that you have to be fearless and understand what it takes to move forward in your business, because we've been taught to be so guarded in what we do. So we do the same types of parties, the same types of events over and over again. So it's been difficult to build similar communities in Charlotte sometimes, because I would go to Black businesses or Black nightclubs, and I have a more difficult time in setting up events there than I would at some of the white clubs I dealt with, because I would present the white clubs with, this is what I'm going to do. This is the amount of people that I bring in. I would say, hey, this is what I've got. Give me, 2 months and I can build up something here. And I would say 8 times out of 10, they would do it because they looked at it as an opportunity for them to make money and to spread further. And these are clubs that are bigger than the Black clubs that I go to, but I would go to the Black clubs first, and I would always have a difficult time in either getting communication, or they try to charge me so much money to start the events. And it's like, but I'm looking for partnerships. I'm not looking to pay you money to do something. I'm looking to build something together so that way we can both make money. And I think that's one of the most difficult things, especially with some people in our community, is that we're looking for a quick come up instead of the long-term monetary goal or cultural goal or the community goal. And I think that's one of the separations in Charlotte. And Raleigh-Durham has actually seen a lot of progress because they realize that they do need to work together. And speaking of the 6 degrees of separation, one of my best friends is one of the founders of Black Wall Street.
Okay.
Yeah. So I talked to him the other day, and we're looking at doing some things and possibly relaunching. You may have to strike that, but we're looking at expanding it. I want to expand it to, one of the things I've talked to him about is having a hub in Columbia. And so that we have the big Durham.
Yes.
Yeah, so when they have the big one in Durham, there's like little mini ones in the Carolinas. And I'm all about expansion and looking at different ways of cooking the same gumbo, but making it spicier, a little bit more delicious. There's always ways of doing that. I think the Carolinas can develop a creative entrepreneur network, but we have to get out of our own way. And that's the Carolinas, North and South Carolina, because everybody wants to be the big dog. Everybody wants to be the number one. We're all cogs in the wheels. Like, the hands on the watch and the gears on the inside of the watch are equally as important for the watch to work. So it doesn't matter what the size is. All of it has to work together for that watch to give you good time. So, I know I'm not the biggest promoter in the Carolinas. I know that I'm not the most successful sync person in the Carolinas, but I do pretty well. But I know other people that do just as well or better than me, but I'm not looking down on them, and I will partner with them all day. I will partner with promoters all day because I know that if we work together, we can do more than just me by myself a lot of times, because I may have a skill set that person doesn't have, or they may have a skill set that I don't have. And That way we can all move forward. But if we have to get out of our own way. Like I said, I don't have to be the top dog. When Frequency 360 first came out, I made it a point that nobody knew it was me. It was an entity, and it was not attached to me by name at all. Because I didn't want it to be, because, you have haters and you have lovers. I wanted it to be on its own merit. And once we get out of our own way and just say, hey, we're all here to help each other, then we can really develop a creative entrepreneurial network, just a business. Because, in 5-10 years, say if I have a storefront and I need a photographer, I know you, and you will take care of that for me. I don't have to think, if someone who is doing an ad campaign for Wrangler jeans, say, hey, I know Joffrey does scoring. I'll call, hey, Joffrey, man, this guy's looking for something for scoring for a commercial. We take care of that. But it's no ego. It's nothing. Everybody's helping each other out. And, I don't know if you guys watch Roland Martin or not, but he's been really going in on advertising dollars for Black businesses and how we don't get the money. The money is out there. We just don't go get it. And there's enough infighting for us to keep us where we are. Just like, I'm tired of that. I want to, doesn't matter, hook or crook, whoever I got to work with, I don't get offended by anybody as long as you don't say anything bad about my mama. We good. And let's work together. And I don't mind pushing boxes or carrying crates. If you need me tomorrow, say, hey, Joffrey, will you come and we're setting up this photo shoot? Can you just hold this light for 10 minutes? If I'm free, I'll do it, because I know that if you need the help, I'll be there to help you, because people have done the same thing for me, and people forget that all the time. And I think that's another thing about community, is that people get to certain levels and they forget what it took them to get where they are. And so it's big I and little you. Like, no, I'm always going to be someone who is grateful and thankful for the people who have taught me, the people who give me opportunities. And I'm not above sweeping a floor. I'm not above, like, I would DJ gigs, right? And one of and I'll give them a shout out to Petras. I would break down the equipment at the end of the night. No DJs would do that. And so after that, anytime I would come in, all my stuff would be set up for me automatically. And I'd have a drink ready. Because I wasn't too big, even though I'm getting paid to DJ and I could have just left. I'm not too big to get and, do stuff with the quote unquote regular people, because guess what? I'm regular people too.
Yeah, there's definitely something to be said for folk that jump in and just help out however needed. Particularly when you're talking about productions and stuff, man, like if somebody who is part of the organization, part of it, has no problem being a grip, like that's some honorable position right there,
Exactly. And one thing I can speak with firsthand, just from working with you in the past, is I remember when I met with you for the first time, because I think we met in passing back in the day here in Columbia. But when I came up to Charlotte and I met with you up there at the bodega, one of the things that was interesting about it with Hilltop was I remember, like, when we were trying to set up the event that we were doing through BeatCon. I remember, like I said, you weren't even, I think you were supposed to be out of town that day we did the event, or you were busy doing something, but you were essentially like key in us being able to connect with Scott. But then the day the event was there, you still stopped in to check us out. Cause I didn't even think you were, cause I remember when we were talking to you, you were like, yeah, I got this and that to do. It was like, oh, okay. So he's not going to, he's not coming through, whatever. And you still had enough time to come by, still to chop it up with us, ask like, hey, if y'all need anything, this is what you need to do and stuff like that. And like I said, that was very and we definitely appreciated that. And so and I could definitely attest to what you said firsthand. Like, you're the type of person that does follow up in those detailed things, those supportive things that you don't even necessarily have to do, but you go out your way to do that. So I can attest to that.
Thank you, man. Hey, you know what? I had people do it for me, and it's really, really important for me to let people know how I really feel about them, because good or bad, You know, I've gotten in trouble sometimes because I say exactly what's on my spirit at the time sometimes. But, you know, at least you're getting the 100% authentic me all the time. So when you see me doing this, say, hey, I'll be there, I made, because that day I think I had to drive to Atlanta. And I was like, I'm going to come here first. Just make sure that you guys are good, anything you need, before I head on out. But I don't mind doing that because people did that same thing for me. People have taken care of me in ways that I can only, that if I wrote it down in a book and reread it back to myself, I wouldn't believe it. So it's just me giving back to just the community and people in general. Now, will I fight? Yes. I'm a terrible human sometimes, but I try to keep it on the up and up and keep it good 95% of the time.
Definitely. Well, I guess on the next question I have, one of the themes of our podcast is we like to shed light on other aspects of life for creatives, just people who are just general hustlers, movers and shakers of our age, especially when it comes to family responsibilities. For example, Friday night when I was working on this podcast, like prepping the questions, I had my daughter, I got an 8-month-old. She was like crawling around me, spitting up random all kinds of crazy stuff, right? Well, this whole time I'm typing up these questions to try to be serious, right? Like doing research. But with that being said, it's like, work-life balance is important for all of us to be successful. What tips or suggestions would you give to someone seeking a better work-life or balance as a creative entrepreneur? As a matter of fact, she's crying right now in the background.
Let's see. Rest. Rest. I'm going to be completely honest. For a while there, I was substituting my health and I was substituting peace of mind sometimes for always being on the go. Mm-hmm. And I never gave myself an opportunity to rest until I actually broke down, like mentally, physically, everything, because I'd been going because I'd seen some successes but I would never recognize and sit back and realize the things that I'd done, and I was always looking for the next thing. It was like another high, I gotta do something else. I haven't done enough. And when you never rest, you don't get better ideas. Your body will break down. Your mind gets worse. Mm-hmm. I would say you have to give yourself time to rest and not think about things. And, I have to give it up to my girl again, because she made sure after a while, I was like, look, I've seen you go for days without sleep and be on the road for 3 or 4 days at a time. You need to rest. And so now I have to take regular naps. I never understood that naps were so great until like last year. Naps are amazing. So that would be number one. Number two is to spend time doing things outside of what you do. So if you are a photographer, go out and do some pottery. If you're a musician, go out and go dig some plants up or something, go out and live life. Because if you make your job or your creative endeavors your main focus, you're pretty boring. And most people don't like to be around boring people.
You're going to burn all that fuel that you need to do that. Like, you stop having, you're right. You stop having creative ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Been there. This is something that comes up regularly on our show, that, people are always expressing that need to self-care, to take breaks, find other things that are unrelated to your main medium, I guess, whether you're getting paid for it or not, but whatever you're producing, you gotta find some alternative breaks.
You have to, because everybody has that one friend that is passionate about something and that's all they talk about, and you hate them. You hate being around them. You love them. Like the CrossFit people or the new vegans.
Yes. Those two.
You can eat quinoa and then you don't have to eat beans anymore. Hey, Billy, why are you eating that hamburger? You love them to death, but, you don't like being around those people. So you just can't be that person. If you own a computer store, and you talked about computers all the time, people would stop hanging around you. Just live life, live your experiences, be well-rounded. Know that sometimes you won't have balance though, but you have to realize that like I create in spurts. Like Kevin was saying that, I have a lot of different projects and under a bunch of different aliases. It's because I do it in spurts. So I'll have an idea. I want to do a jazz record and I'll just work on a jazz record for a week. But then after that, I won't look at music for like 2 or 3 days. So it's all in spurts. So you have to also learn when you can create and when you can't create.
Just beating your head on the wall.
Yeah, beating your head on the wall. I'll give you. I love telling this story because it's very true, and I use it all the time. You can use it for any type of creative endeavor. Is that my art teacher in junior high school was my dad's cousin, so it was hard for me to call him by his real name because we call him Lebo. And so I'm in class, trying not to call him Lebo, but he said one thing about art is that art isn't about adding more. It's about knowing when to stop. He said, you can always add another cloud. You can always add another tree, but you have to know when to stop. You have to know when you're finished with it. That's the most important thing. And that's the same thing for music. That's the same thing for photography. The same thing for cooking, because you can add too many spices to your steak, and it's disgusting. You gotta know when to stop.
That's interesting too, because a lot of times when we see something that is like, people at the apex of their creativeness, not all the time, but a lot of times it's a very stripped down version. They're only using, like a hat and a snare and one kick and some other sound, and that's it. Or they're using like one line to draw this whole occurrence in a visual piece, but it's like, that is key, like knowing how to strip it back and just do as much with as little.
Mm-hmm. It's very, very, very true, man. Because
we've been talking a lot about these different ways to collaborate and interact and team up with other people. So what projects you got working on currently?
Let's see. Right now, I have about 4 alias projects that I don't want to name them all because I don't like people knowing that they're me.
That's fine.
Some are like lo-fi. I've got some jazz, some ambient stuff, some orchestral stuff. Right now, I do sync work for TV and movies, so background work. Right now, I have a finished album called Kahlo that will probably be deciding whether or not to put it out on vinyl, but it's jazz interpretations of Frida Kahlo's visual work. So this will be the third. Oh
man, this sounds dope.
Yeah, so this is the third in the series. The first one was called Basquiat, and it's musical interpretations of Basquiat paintings. The second one is Umoja, which Cedric Umoja is their audio interpretations of his paintings. They're all on Spotify. Those. I'm also looking at launching a couple of different projects for poets, thinking about relaunching Frequency 360 Live, but in a different iteration. Also sell art inspired and creative entrepreneur inspired merchandise at frequency360.com. It's FREAQUENCY 360.com. There's also another project that we're going to be doing in regards to food that's going to be coming up pretty soon. So within the next 6 months, just follow me on Frequency 360. You'll be able to see the things that are coming up in regards to that. And I just talked to one of my chef friends, and we're thinking about doing a monthly in Charlotte where we pull up one of his food trucks in one of they're gentrifying this black neighborhood, but it's a really dope corridor that's still us. And we're going to do live music and food and show movies once a month, just to make things kind of cool in that area. So we're always looking for different ways of showcasing art in non-conventional ways.
Yeah, that sounds dope. All of that sounds dope. You mentioned the Frequency 360 website. Is there any other like media that you want to put out there, ways that you want people to contact you, get in connection with you? We'll go ahead and post it on the site with the podcast and whatnot. That's hilltopglove.com for everyone out there. Hilltopglove.com.
That's right.
Sure. If you want to follow me on Instagram, it's Joffrey on the Beat. There, I usually, because I'm always making music, I do remixes of hip hop songs, or I'll do beats on that. That's really hip hop specific, even though I'll post up different things. That one is mainly for that. I do have a Bandcamp. It's Joffrey on the Beat as well, where you can get remixes. If you're DJs, if you want some exclusive remixes of popular songs, then that's the place to go. I'll do it for the DJ because I'm a DJ as well. So I'll make like these really cool remixes, like I did Roxanne by UTFO and Roxanne Shante, but I flipped it with Roxanne by the Police.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, to give away to the DJs, because there's something you can play that other people are like, whoa, what is that? You know, so you'll be able to find that information there on my Bandcamp. And I give away T-shirts all the time if you follow me. I give away music all the time if you follow me, because I don't look at the people who follow our music as quote unquote fans. They're family, because a lot of people I talk to on a regular basis, or we become friends, or I listen to their music, or, you know, they pass my music along to other people. So I send out the messages to people every once in a while. If you follow me on Bandcamp, I'm like, hey, thank you guys for supporting me. If you email me your address, I'll send 3 people out T-shirts, and I just send them out T-shirts because, you know, it's a thank you to them for supporting me. And people forget that, you know, we're all here because of other people. And so I don't mind, you know, taking time and answering people's questions or chopping it up with them for a few minutes. Or they say, hey, man, I got a song. Will you listen to it? I'll listen to it. You know, I'm not too big because, like I said, I know people that are way bigger than I am, that I'm friends with. And I'll never get a big head, whether, you know, I sell 1 million copies of a record or 10 copies of a record. I'm still the same person. Same person that'll fix you a sandwich in the middle of the day. Also the same person, if you talk about my mama, I'm going to kneecap you.
Dopeness. Well, like I said, with that being said, we're going to go ahead and put a close of this episode. Once again, we appreciate you joining us today, Ja, and stuff. We look forward, like I said, to continue with chop it up with you, of course, work with you in the future as well. And Mike, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Man, I just really appreciate you being on, sharing what you're doing with us. Look forward to seeing, more things coming out of the Charlotte area, more things coming out of the Carolinas in general. Let us know if there's anything we can do in Columbia, help out with that. You're talking about poets. We know some poets.
Just one of the things that I can say about myself, if I say that I'm going to do something by hook or by crook, I will try to make it happen. And so if I say that, hey, look, in the next 6 months, we're going to do something really dope in Columbia, guess what? We're going to do something really dope.
All right, let's do it. I'll grip. I'll move boxes.
That's exactly it. Shoot, other than that, that's this.
That's it for today's episode of the Hilltop Glove Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and other platforms. Also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Hilltop Glove.
That's it for today's episode of the Hilltop Glove Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and other platforms. Also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Hilltop Glove.